Chapter 18. I spent 5 days in the infirmary. Anna was out of her league. She could take x-rays, but never saw the results. Instead, she'd put the undeveloped films in a locker, an elevator, like my closet, and then get back a list of things to do. In the end, I was surprised to find that the only serious injury was a concussion. I had bruises and contusions from head to toe, a nasty cut on my forearm. Anna said it would normally have had stitches, but too much time had passed before they found me, and 2 dislocated fingers. My arms and hands were bandaged like a mummy's, both my wrists in braces, and I was on a heavy dose of pain medication. But that was all. She said I probably felt worse than I was. I felt terrible. Some days, I was the only person in the infirmary, and other days the entire gang was there with me. I heard it was different now. Things had been shaken up. For a while, Curtis worried about another gang war, like before the truce, but that had blown over. In the end, 4 people left the society. 3 had gone to Havoc, and Anna joined the V's. Since Dylan was gone and Anna was now a V, the medical contract was automatically transferred to us, which infuriated Isaiah. The strangest news, however, was Iceman's explanation of events. Jane was dead, though we got no explanation about how or where. But Dylan and Laura were sent to detention. Curtis had asked Isaiah about that, but Isaiah insisted he wasn't involved. Someone else must have taken them. On the 5th day, knowing that I was about to be discharged, I got out of bed and looked around the infirmary. I couldn't face the idea of going back to my room, back to normal routine. I needed to find a way out of here. I needed escape plans and weapons and tools. I inspected the elevator through which Anna sent x-ray film and received instructions. It was short and built into the basement wall. I would have assumed it was just a cupboard if I hadn't known better. There were no buttons or controls. The other cabinets had about what I expected: gauze and tongue depressors and latex gloves. There were syringes but no needles. Nothing that looked like a weapon of any kind. I took a bottle of rubbing alcohol because I vaguely remembered something from a cop show about how to use it as a weapon. At the very least, I figured it was flammable, and I hoped that whoever was watching on the cameras would assume my theft was a dangerously moronic attempt at getting drunk. "Hey, Bence," I spun from the cupboards to see Becky standing in the doorway. I did my best to look innocent as I put the alcohol bottle on the counter. "Hi." She was holding a clipboard against her chest, her arms folded. "I just need to ask you a couple of questions before you're released. Stupid forms I have to fill out." She made a fake grimace and laughed. I nodded and moved to sit. I was wearing a pair of white flannel pajamas Anna had taken from a closet, and I felt like a kid as I climbed up onto the too tall hospital bed. "There's paperwork in this place?" I asked. "That's 90% of my contract," Becky said. I lay back onto the raised pillows. My head still ached though the pain was duller now. "Shoot," I said, staring at the ceiling. I didn't want to look at her. There were plenty of people in this school that I strongly suspected of being robots. Becky was on the list. All of the society was. She kicked her pen. "First, how would you rate the care you received while you've been in the infirmary?" I rolled my head to look at her. She smiled. "You're kidding." Becky glanced down at the clipboard. "Scale of 1 to 5. 1 being excellent and 5 being not good at all." I looked back at the ceiling and then closed my eyes. This school, where prisoners and people die, cares about good customer service? "We don't know that people—" Becky stopped. There was silence. I cracked open one eye. She was wiping her cheek. Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry." "It's okay." We sat there for several seconds, Becky staring at her paper and me looking at the white cement ceiling. It was never going to be normal here. I'd been fooling myself before, back when I thought I could actually enjoy myself. I had liked paintball and the good food and the guys in my gang and Jane. But it was all a lie. Becky held up her clipboard. The paper was blank. "There's no paperwork," she said and wiped her eye again. "I just wanted to check on you." "I'm okay." I returned to my dorm that afternoon. A few people had made get-well cards for me, and some girls collected plants from the garden and put them in a vase on my desk. I thanked them all, but things were different now. I hid the bottle of rubbing alcohol in my pillowcase. I needed more ingredients before I could make it into a weapon, but that could wait. In my 5 days spent lying in bed, I'd come up with a theory. My logic went like this. First, we were in the school for a reason, either to be tested or to be trained. I couldn't guess which because neither of them really made sense. If we were being tested, then the test was extremely broad and abstract. If we were being trained, then you'd think that there would be more focus on what we were learning better. Teaching, stricter testing, higher expectations. Even the people who thought we were being trained as soldiers because of the paintball didn't have any answer for why we weren't being taught tactics. We were just making everything up. Anyway, if I assumed we were in school for a reason, then I should also assume that the presence of Jane and any other androids, I still hated using that word for her, would to be aid in the training or testing. So, if androids were the basis for the experiment or training, then it would make sense that they had been here since the beginning of the experiment. Jane was perfect evidence. She was the first of all of us. I decided to chart all of the students, all 68 of us who remained, and figured out who came first. If my reasoning held up, then they should be the androids. Unless they all were. And of course, I had no idea where to draw the line. Were there 5 of them? 10? 30? I made a chart in a notebook, and then walked down the dorm hallways, with Mason's help, asking how long people had been there. I didn't tell Mason why I was doing it, and I think that he might have thought I'd lost it. Maybe he wasn't too far off. The V's all offered up their info easily enough, and most everyone else did too. When I got down to Oakland's room, Skiver opened the door. Oakland was sitting in his chair, his feet up on the desk while he scrolled through his mini computer. He glanced up long enough to see who I was, and then looked back at the screen. "Hey guys," I said, "I have a couple of questions for you." Skiver started to close the door in my face, but I stepped forward and it hit my shoe. He scowled and puffed out his chest. "What's your problem?" "Just have a question," I said. "Humour me. I'm trying to chart the whole school and see who's been here the longest." "What do you care?" "I'm curious." He gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes in what was probably supposed to be a threatening face. "You got me out of bed for that?" Skiver acted tougher than his size warranted, but ever since the fight on our first day, he'd taunted me as though he'd beaten me in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. "I realise that it's a long way from the bed to the door," I said, "and I apologise." He stared back at me, with more of his semi-threatening expressions. I pointed to the chair. "If you want, you could sit and catch your breath." Skiver opened his mouth, but Oakland spoke. "What's the question?" "How long have you guys been here?" "Why do you care?" Skiver snapped. "You already asked me that," I said calmly, watching Oakland. He looked back at me, thinking. Skiver seemed to be confused as to why he wasn't hitting something. I decided to ease the tension. I'm trying to figure something out about this stupid place," I said, "but I need to talk to the people who've been here the longest." Oakland stared at me for a long time and then finally spoke. "Jane was the oldest, wasn't she?" His words weren't sympathizing, but they weren't his normal jerk self either. It was a simple statement. I nodded. "Yeah." "About 1 year and 9 months, Oakland said. "I think. Not totally sure. Skiver's less than a year." Skiver looked confused that Oakland would help me, and stared as I wrote down the dates in my notebook. "Thanks, guys," I said. As I was turning to leave, Skiver spoke. "Nice job taking care of your girl, Fisher." I paused, rage building up in my chest. Taking a deep breath, I looked back at Oakland. I stared at him long enough for Skiver to wonder what was going on, so that he looked back too. Then I sucker punched Skiver in the jaw. He dropped straight to the floor. Oakland's eyes met mine for a moment, paused, and then he turned back at his computer. By the end of the night, I had gotten answers from almost all of the guys. 2 society guys refused to answer, saying that they needed to ask Isaiah before they helped me. I wanted to hit them too. Isaiah didn't answer either, but I was able to find out about him from several others. Not surprisingly, he was one of the oldest. I knew it. He had to be an android. Over the next 2 days, I was able to gather the information from the girls, in class and in the cafeteria. In the end, I found that there were 5 of them who had arrived at school together, including Isaiah. They all claimed to have been in the school for just over 2 years, and they remembered driving in together in a van. In addition to Isaiah, there was another society kid, Raymond, and 2 girls from Havoc, Mouse and Tiny, and Rosa, one of the V's. I didn't know Rosa very well. She was one of the oldest girls. She had the best paint girl gun. She had asthma. She didn't seem to go out of her way to talk to people. I was going to have to keep an eye on her. Of course, the entire list was a guess. It was all still based on the assumption that the androids came first, and it was based on an even greater assumption that there were more than just Jane. That night, lying in bed, I wanted to say something to Mason. Based on my chart, he was among the newer half of the students. Hopefully, that meant he wasn't part of whatever this all was. It was dark, and I could hear him in the bunk above me, quietly tapping on his mini computer. "Hey," I said. He yawned. "What's up?" I paused. Dim light glowed from his screen, and it reflected off the smooth lens of the security camera in the corner. "Nothing, I guess," I said. "'Kay." It would have to wait until we were outside, away from the microphones. I got up from my bed, too awake to sleep, and took my computer from the closet. The contracts were coming up for the renewal again soon, and I was curious about the medical one. There had been talk that the society might try to take it back from us. The gangs were supposed to get together to discuss it soon. It sounded like a silly thing to fight over to me, but I'd heard that the contract disputes often got violent. That's why everything had to be settled with a truce. I read the medical requirements, but there wasn't much interest there. The points were relatively low compared with the big contracts like groundskeeping and the cafeteria, the two huge ones that Havoc owned. Bored, I toggled over to the purchase screens and looked at what new items were being offered. It wasn't much. A few new kinds of snacks, a few new outfits, all for girls, and a new video game. The paintball stuff was enticing. Page after page of camouflage, clothing, and 8 different kinds of ghillie suits. There were even a white and grey one for when the snow started to fall. Looking at the paintball pages, I wanted one of everything. Not because I wanted to excel in paintball, but because escape would be much easier if I could do it in full camo. But it'd be a while before I could afford anything good. Breaking the rules probably hadn't been beneficial to my points, and I only had payment for part of a month. I clicked on a few menus to try to check my account. I hadn't fiddled with it much, and it took me a few minutes to find it. That's not right. Hey Mason, I said, confused. How many points do you have? I knew he'd been saving up for several months for a ghillie suit, only splurging on a few things like the paintball grenades. Hang on, he said sleepily. I could hear the tap of his keyboard. Looks like 1,830. That was good. 1,830. He can buy most anything in the catalogue, except the most expensive things. I only need 45 more, he said. Hey, did you see that they finally added winter camo to... I wasn't listening to Mason anymore. Something was wrong. My point total read 5 million. The school was trying to buy me off.